Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so today we're jumping into something you, the learner, sent our way. It's a book called Full Woe, right? Which roughly translates to Full Score Learning Method, From Efficient Learning to a Perfect Life. Quite a title.
It really is. And our mission today is basically to pull out the core ideas, the strategies from this book to help you become, well, a more effective learner and maybe get closer to that full score life.
It's definitely ambitious, but the book lays out a pretty clear path. It focuses on 7 well-known high-efficiency learning methods.
Yeah, I saw that. We've got the Feynman method, mind mapping, memory palace.
Yeah.
What else?
Pomodoro Technique, efficient note-taking, deliberate practice, and also the belief rule, the power of belief.
Okay.
And the author, Lulu, argues that really mastering these isn't just about grades or work success. It's key to a more fulfilling life overall.
All right, let's dig into that. The book starts with this core idea, this chain reaction. Cognition shapes behavior, which builds habits, and those ultimately give you your results. Exactly. It sounds simple, but the emphasis is really on the how. The skills, the methods, the actual techniques you use, that's what separates high achievers, according to the author.
That makes sense?
And tied into that are what the book calls the 7 successful elements. Things like initiative, thinking ability, memory, concentration.
Note-taking, repetition, and emotional intelligence.
Right. And these are presented as like the foundation stones needed for pretty much any goal, whether it's academic or personal growth. You see these elements reflected in the 7 methods we'll talk about.
I found the part debunking the genius myth really interesting. It uses examples like Djokovic.
Yeah, who wasn't an overnight tennis star?
Right. And Van Gogh, who started painting later and, wasn't immediately hailed as brilliant.
Or J.K. Rowling, publishing Harry Potter in her 30s.
Uh-huh.
The point being, it's less about some mystical innate talent.
And much more about method, practice, and, well, sticking with it, developing the right approach.
And that ties directly back to you, the learner. The book really pushes for a mindset shift. It's saying, instead of getting hung up on, say, your perceived IQ or limitations.
Yeah, like, I'm just not good at this.
Exactly. Instead, figure out your goal and then actively look for and apply the methods that will get you there. It's about taking control.
I like the analogy they used that effort without the right method is like having a fast car with a flat tire.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You can rev the engine all you want, but you're not going anywhere fast. It's not just about working hard. It's about working smart.
Which brings us to this concept they call the cognitive hourglass. It's a useful visual.
How does that work?
Well, imagine an hourglass. The top part holds your cognition, your understanding, your thoughts, then your behavior, your actions, and your habits, your routines.
Okay.
These then sort of filter down through the neck of the hourglass, representing time, and determine what accumulates in the bottom chamber, your life results.
Ah, I see. So what's in the bottom is a direct result of what went in the top.
Precisely. Your current outcomes reflect your past thinking, actions, and habits.
So if you don't like the results, you need to change what you're putting in at the top. This idea of restarting life, as the book puts it.
Yeah, consciously breaking old, ineffective patterns and replacing them with these efficient, scientifically backed methods, taking charge of that flow.
And we build up this personal method library over time.
That's the term, yes.
Yeah.
It's the collection of techniques we have for learning, for solving problems. The quality of that library really impacts how well we learn, make decisions, our overall effectiveness.
So we need to consciously stock it with good stuff.
Exactly. Fill it with effective techniques.
The book also stresses why these methods matter so much. I thought the analogy of the airplane was quite powerful.
Oh, the one about deviating slightly off course.
Yeah. A tiny error at the start of a long flight means you end up somewhere completely different. It's the same with learning. Start with bad methods.
You may work hard, but end up far from your goal.
Yeah, it illustrates the cumulative effect. And then there's the folding paper analogy.
Ah, yes, for exponential growth. Folding a piece of paper, 7 times makes it thicker than you'd expect?
Something like that, yeah. The point is that using effective methods consistently leads to surprisingly large improvements over time. Compounding gains.
Absolutely. And the underlying message through all this is that learning how to learn developing those meta skills is arguably more valuable than just accumulating facts.
It gives you the tools to keep learning effectively throughout your life.
Precisely. Which leads us nicely into the first of these 7 methods, the book details, focusing on initiative to the Feynman learning method.
Okay, Feynman, physics genius, right?
Nobel laureate, yes. But the book stresses his genius wasn't just about a high IQ score. It was his approach to understanding. It starts by contrasting proactive mindsets, like genuinely desiring success, with reactive ones, like just fearing failure.
That's a useful distinction. Where do you usually operate from?
And initiative itself is defined as, acting without needing that external push, seeking things out.
And Feynman exemplified this.
Definitely. Think about those stories of how he learned. His father explaining dinosaurs not just in feet, but relative to their house.
Making it relatable, understandable.
Or the bird names. Knowing the name in multiple languages doesn't mean you understand the bird itself, what it does. It's about deeper understanding, not just labels.
That's a great point.
And he apparently acted as a little teacher for his classmates.
Ah, learning by teaching.
Exactly. Trying to explain something forces you to really grapple with it, find the gaps in your own knowledge.
I remember reading about that why interview with him. He kept pushing back, wanting the interviewer to understand the feeling of magnets repelling, not just accept a surface-level answer.
Yes. And explaining that why questions have different levels of answers depending on who you're talking to, it all points to his core method,
Which is?
the Feynman learning method.
Yeah.
Essentially, test your understanding by trying to explain a concept in the simplest possible terms, as if teaching a complete beginner.
If you can't explain it simply, you don't really get it yourself.
That's the core idea.
Yeah.
And the book then shows the learning pyramid.
Right, the one that shows retention rates. Lectures and reading are quite low.
Very passive, low retention.
Yeah.
But active methods like discussion, practicing by doing, and especially teaching others, that's way up at 90% retention.
Huge difference. It's that input versus output thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. Listening and reading are input. Teaching is output. It forces active processing, structuring, simplifying. Much deeper learning.
So the actual steps for the Feynman method.
The book lays out 4. 1, pick your topic to find what you want to learn. 2, try to teach it out loud on paper to a friend, whatever, using really simple language.
Okay.
3, when you get stuck or it sounds confusing, that's your gap. Go back to the source material, figure it out, fill the gap.
And 4.
Simplify it even more.
Right.
Refine your explanation, use analogies, make it crystal clear.
This sounds like a great way to fight against that feeling of, oh yeah, I read that chapter, I get it, when maybe you don't.
Exactly. It breaks what the book calls pseudo-learning. It forces active recall, identifies weaknesses immediately, pushes deep thinking, and the review step makes it stick. If you're stumbling, maybe break it down even smaller. What's the absolute core idea?
And there's a practical exercise, the 9 palace grid.
Yeah, like a tic-tac-toe grid. Put your main topic in the center, then put 8 key subtopics or concepts in the surrounding squares.
And then Feynman each of those 8.
That's the idea. Teach each point simply to really master the whole subject and see where you're weak.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move on to the next one then. Thinking ability and the mind mapping method.
Right. This section starts by talking about thought patterns and how they can sometimes hold us back.
Like mental ruts.
Kind of.
Yeah.
The example used is fantastic survivorship bias with the WWII planes.
Oh, where they wanted to add armor to the parts that came back with bullet holes?
Exactly. But the statistician, Abraham Wald, realized the crucial insight. The planes that didn't come back were likely hit in the places where the survivors didn't have holes.
So they should reinforce the areas that looked untouched on the surviving planes. Wow.
It perfectly shows how our assumptions, our standard way of thinking, can mislead us, like a bad program running.
So mind mapping is presented as a way to break out of those patterns.
Yeah, a tool to tap into more of the brain's potential. It mentions Tony Buzan, who popularized it, and even companies like Boeing, supposedly using it to boost efficiency.
So what is it fundamentally? Just drawing bubbles and lines?
Well, a bit more structured than that. It's a visual way to represent thoughts. You start with a central image or word for your main theme.
Like apple.
Good example from the book, yeah.
Yeah.
Then you draw branches radiating out for the main related ideas like taste, color, uses.
And then smaller branches off those.
Exactly. Sub-branches for more specific details. And crucially, you use keywords and key images on the branches, not long sentences.
Why keywords?
They trigger associations. Your brain can leap from one keyword to related ideas much faster than reading prose. It sparks connections.
And images. A picture is worth 1,000 words.
That's the principle. Our brains are wired for visuals. The book shows how just the image of an apple triggers loads of associations instantly.
So combine keywords and images on the branches.
Yes, that's the ideal, leveraging both. And the branches aren't just connectors. They show the hierarchy, the structure of the ideas. Apple, taste most sweet sour. You see the relationship visually.
What are the main benefits claimed for mind mapping?
The book highlights promoting divergent thinking, exploring lots of possibilities, building connections between ideas, emphasizing key points visually, and fostering creativity by giving you that big picture overview.
Are there rules for drawing them?
Some principles, yeah. Start with a central image. Use images throughout, not just words. Use color, different line thicknesses maybe to show importance or hierarchy. Keep it clear.
Any practical tips, like paper orientation?
Landscape is usually recommended on blank paper. Use lots of colors. Maybe add codes or symbols. Keep text horizontal on the lines. And leave space. Don't cram it all in.
Does it matter if it looks messy?
That's a common misconception the book addresses. It's not primarily an organizational chart for others. Even a messy map is valuable for your thinking and recall. It reflects your connections.
How would you use it for, say, reviewing notes?
It's great for that. You condense potentially pages of linear notes into one visual page. The hierarchy helps you see the structure, and you can review it much faster. It links reading, input, to drawing and organizing, output.
What about exams or writing?
For exams, it's good for quickly brainstorming key points under pressure. For writing, fantastic for outlining, structuring your arguments visually before you start drafting prose.
Can it be used in teams?
Definitely. For brainstorming, group discussions, planning projects, it makes everyone's ideas visible and helps structure the conversation. Even for understanding how a business works, mapping out departments and functions.
And there's an exercise for reading a book with it.
Yes. Central image for the book, main branches for chapters, or maybe the 5W1H questions: who, what, when, where, why, how. Sub-branches for details. Add your own thoughts and connections, then use that map to review. The key is it's your map reflecting your understanding.
Okay, that's mind mapping. Now for the third one, memory and the memory palace method. It sounds intriguing.
It really is. The book kicks this off with the example of chess grandmasters. Their ability to see moves ahead isn't magic. It's built on having tens of thousands of chunks of chess knowledge stored in long-term memory.
Chunks, like patterns and positions?
Exactly. Recognizable configurations and sequences. The book estimates 50,000 to 100,000 chunks for a grandmaster.
Wow.
And it uses the musician Ryuichi Sakamoto as another example. His creativity flowed from having a vast internal library of musical chunks. Having enough chunks in a field is basically what defines expertise.
So it's not necessarily innate memory genius?
The book argues strongly against that. It cites the deliberate practice experiments where people with average memory became memory experts through specific training. It's a skill that can be developed.
And memory doesn't just automatically decline with age.
Not necessarily. They mention investor Lily Liu recalling company data years later, even when talking with Charlie Munger, who was quite elderly. Meaningful, reviewed information can stick around.
What about that tip of the tongue feeling? When you know something but can't recall it?
The book explains that highlights the retrieval process. The memory trace is there, but the pathway to access it is temporarily blocked or weak.
So how does memory work, neurologically speaking? The book uses an analogy.
Yes, memory is traces in the brain. It compares neurons to houses and the connections between them, the nerve fibers to roads. The more a road is used, a memory recalled, the stronger it gets.
Like a well-trodden path.
Exactly. And these pathways involve complex electrical and chemical signals. Active recall strengthens them.
And the difference between short-term and long-term memory.
Short-term is like your computer's RAM limited capacity, temporary workspace. Long-term is the hard drive, vast, durable storage.
How does info get from RAM to the hard drive, so to speak?
Information hits short-term memory, gets evaluated as this important, meaningful, connected to anything. If yes, it gets encoded into long-term memory. Recall is pulling it back from the hard drive into RAM to work with it.
What makes us remember some things better than others?
Several factors mentioned. Primacy and recency, we remember beginnings and ends better. Connecting new stuff to what we already know, building bridges.
Meaningful content.
Definitely. The book's example of a squirrel in a hat is way more memorable than just a squirrel. It's unusual.
And chunking again, like phone numbers.
Crucial. Breaking big things into smaller, meaningful units. Experts chunk much more effectively in their domain. Also, things perceived as important, like for survival, or things that are just interesting or stand out, like info about your favorite band versus, say, obscure historical dates. Even positive encouragement helps.
Okay, then there's the bottle theory.
Yeah, another analogy. The bottle is your memory capacity. Stones are pieces of information.
How do you fit more stones in?
Well, you can't really increase the bottle size easily.
Hmm.
But you can change the stones. Chunking big stones into smaller pebbles lets you fit more in.
Ah, breaking information down.
Right. And distribution, don't try to cram all the stones in at once.
Mm-hmm.
Spaced repetition, adding them gradually, works much better than overloading.
Which leads to the importance of review.
Absolutely critical. The book cites Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve. We forget rapidly without review. It even gives ratios from a study, something like pre-study, study, and review should be in a 1.4.4 ratio in terms of time spent, and provides a sample review schedule.
Like review after a day, then a week, then a month.
Something like that, yeah. Spaced repetition is key. And finally, the bottle theory says making the stones interesting and visual helps them stick. Enjoyable learning is memorable learning.
So all these principles, chunking, visualization, association, spaced review, they all come together in the memory palace method.
Exactly. It's a technique that leverages all of those. It's ancient, apparently, but used by modern memory champs and even fictional characters like Sherlock Holmes. A super database for your mind.
So what is it? How do you build one?
Okay, the core idea is using your strong spatial and visual memory. You choose a place you know really well, your house, your walk to work, anything familiar with distinct spots. That's your palace.
It doesn't have to be an actual palace.
No, definitely not. Your bedroom works fine. Then you mentally place the things you want to remember at specific locations or pegs along a familiar route within that palace.
Pegs,
Yeah.
like the doorway, the sofa, the table.
Precisely. Distinct spots. The three keys are location, the palace and pegs, association, linking the info to the pegs visually, and sequence, following a fixed route.
Can you give an example? The book had one with a boy and an apple.
Right. That was to remember the 7 successful elements. Like the boy climbing the tree is initiative, him thinking about how to get the apple is thinking ability, recalling where he saw apples before is memory, and so on. Each element linked to an action in the scene.
Okay, I see. It creates a little story.
Exactly. He uses chunking, the elements, visualization, the scene, meaning the actions, and links it to a familiar structure, the story.
How does the association part work best?
The book stresses making the associations vivid, maybe even absurd. Use visualization heavily. Connect new info to old, using sound-alikes, rhymes, logical groupings, whatever works, to make a strong, memorable link.
Like the shopping list example, putting chocolate on the door handle.
Yeah, eggs splattered on the sofa, oranges rolling off the table, juice spilling from the vase, beer cooling in front of the TV.
Yeah.
You walk the route in your mind and see the items.
Those distinctive spots are the pegs.
Exactly. They're your retrieval cues. The more distinctive, the better.
And the sequence matters for ordered recall.
Yes, if you need to remember things in order, always follow the same familiar route through your palace. Left to right around your room, for example.
So the 5 steps to build one are:
1. Choose your palace, familiar, real, or imagined, with distinct spots in sequence. 2. Identify the features, the pegs, maybe 5, 10 to start. The book also mentions number image codes for more abstract pegs, like 1 is a candle, 2 is a swan.
Okay.
3. Choose a fixed route through the palace. 4. Practice. Mentally walk the route again and again until it's automatic.
And 5, associate. Link the info you need to remember to each peg using vivid, crazy, memorable images and stories.
That's the process. It takes practice, but it can be incredibly powerful.
Okay, wow. So just to quickly pull that together, we looked at the foundation, needing the right mindset and methods, not just effort. Then the Feynman method, learning by teaching simply, mind mapping for visual thinking and connections, and now the memory palace, using location and association for powerful recall.
And remember, the book's argument is that mastering these isn't just about learning faster. It's about enhancing your core cognitive skills, changing your habits, and ultimately moving towards that full score life, whatever that means for you.
So the message for you, the learner, is really to, well, give these a try, right?
Absolutely. Don't feel you need to master all 7 overnight. Pick one that seems interesting or useful for a current challenge you have. Experiment with it.
Consistent practice is the key, as always.
It truly is. These are skills, and like any skill, they improve with use.
Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe. Consider this. What could change if you consciously applied just one of these methods, Feynman, mind mapping, memory palace, consistently, to how you learn or tackle problems?
Yeah, how might that shift things for you? What could that full score life, in your own terms, start to look like if you actively integrated these powerful tools into your own journey? Something to mull over.